Welcome in, everybody. It's 10 a.m. and you've landed on Flashpoint. I'm Jason Colthorpe. With us this morning, two state lawmakers here to discuss the issues dominating Lansing. Republican Mark Tisdel and Democrat Darrin Camilleri are here. We're also sitting down with Jen Flood, the state budget director. All that and four things on a Is It Spring Yet edition of Flashpoint. Good to have you with us, everybody. No matter what side of the political aisle you're on, someone is fighting to lower your property taxes. The governor's budget is looking to reduce property taxes for seniors. Both Speaker of the House Matt Hall and a ballot initiative want to totally eliminate property taxes for everyone. If that happens, how will lawmakers replace all that funding that goes to services like police and fire and for cities and townships? What about the governor's literacy goals to get Michigan's younger students back on the right track? The governor made that more of a focus in this year's State of the State address, and it comes on the heels of a cell phone ban in schools. Let's start right there this morning with two lawmakers who've been fighting for improvements in education changes. With me this morning is Democratic State Senator Darrin Camilleri, who represents several downriver communities, and Republican Representative Mark Tisdel, who represents the greater Rochester area. Guys, good to have you back with us. Let's start with education, as I mentioned. Following the cell phone ban, which I know you guys have worked together on, the State of the State, where we heard the governor talking about literacy being a primary objective, and obviously more money than ever being going to education. Representative, I'll start with you. Is Michigan finally on the right track to solve the education crisis here?
Well, it's a right track is a real specific focus on literacy. And, you know, people talk about the Mississippi Miracle. That was their one objective. We're coming off a top 10 in 10, which didn't turn out quite so well. Yep. And we're actually in the bottom 10. So a focus on literacy and reading. There's just a study out, 80% of learning is reading. A biology book doesn't do you much good if you can't read it. So,
or if your phone's going off while you're trying to read it.
Well, we're working on that as well, and I think we'll see some big changes this fall. But that was a great bipartisan effort. But that focus on literacy really is everything, and it needs to be consistent year after year, not change every 2 years with the political whims, and the accountability has to remain the same.
And with all the money going toward it, obviously money hasn't solved the problem previously, but do you think this is a good start from where we are now?
Absolutely. I started my career as a teacher, and this is over 10 years ago. And when I got into the classroom, we had some of those same challenges that we're still talking about today, but we've made significant progress on additional funding for schools, making sure that we're creating a better teacher pipeline for our kids. Challenges like the cell phone ban, we got across the finish line on a bipartisan basis. But we also know that we are coming out of decades of disinvestment in our education system. And for the last 3 years, and then even over the term of Governor Whitmer for the last 8 years, we've seen record investment on a bipartisan basis in our school systems. Just last year, we passed the new dyslexia law, which is about dyslexia and identifying that for kids, but it's also about phonics and teaching phonics back in our classroom.
Being a former teacher, and I asked the governor this, like you said, we've spent record amounts, and still the statistics aren't on our side. Is there ever a consideration to pay teachers more, to get better teachers in the classroom?
Well, that's been one of my biggest issues, is figuring out how to address the teacher talent pipeline, and that includes raising wages for educators. We are actually at the bottom when it comes to starting teacher salaries across the country. Other states have figured this out, and something that we've put some effort into. Just this last budget, we passed a $200 million bonus to go out to all of our educators and staff. It's not going to solve all the problem, but it was a few more $100 back in their pockets to help address the cost of living crisis that we've got.
We know the speaker wants to cut as much as he can in a lot of places, but could you ever foresee finding the money to pay teachers more? And do you think that's a solution?
Well, as the governor said in her last of the 2025 State of the State, and kind of reiterated a little bit, not as much of an emphasis in this, money is not the ultimate answer. And what we have to get much better at is reaching agreements on how to best spend that money. Teaching is an honorable, noble career, and it should be financially rewarding as well. There's no doubt about that. And you look at some places like Finland, for example, they're more at-will employees, but good teachers are now making six figures. And so there's no reason we can't become more innovative, more creative in how we do that. But you've got to loosen up some of the binds that tie us to decades-old patterns.
Yeah.
But let's be clear, just real quick. I mean, we would never go back to a system that does not give our teachers the power to collectively bargain their contracts. So there has to be a balance between protecting our union rights right here in Michigan so that our educators can be at the table when these big contracts are made at the local district level, and also ensuring that they have the resources to bump up that pay and benefits. It's also about healthcare. I mean, right now, educator healthcare costs are through the roof, just like everybody else's. And we have a bill that has still not been sent to the governor that the Speaker of the House is holding up that would lower those healthcare costs for our educators and public employees, not just in education, across the state.
Well, balance is the key, but it can go both ways. And the Michigan Education Association has held great sway over policy for decades. And so it's just something new. Obviously, the status quo isn't working, and I'd be interested in looking at a clean slate and both sides working together, see what we could come up with.
Before I let go of education, let me ask you about a bill the House passed this week. It gives final approval on state education guideline changes. How is this one related to gender identity and sexual orientation being taught in schools?
I think the objective there is if the school board is going to be creating a statewide standard, at least give the legislature a chance to take a look at it and weigh in on it.
Will this pass the Senate, do you think?
Probably not. I mean, we're looking at ways to continue to give our locals more control over their own particular decisions at the local district level. I don't think that us interfering with the State Board of Education on guidelines, not a mandate, would really help that cause.
Are they doing it wrong, the way they're doing it now? Is that what you're saying with this?
Well, again, and I agree with what the senator is saying, and you know, there are 110 representatives of the people in the House and 34 in the Senate, and there are 8 state board members. So if we want representation, again, if it's a statewide standard, just let us have a shot at it.
All right. Let me get to property taxes. It seems like this is going to be central as we hit the budget process. There's a ballot initiative plus the Speaker of the House. Both want to get rid of property taxes for everyone. The governor wants to limit them for seniors. Do you think Michigan can afford to get rid of property taxes altogether, considering they fund so many basic services at the city level?
I mean, let's look at why we're talking about this. The economy is not doing well. People are feeling it in their pocketbooks. The cost of groceries is through the roof. The cost of utilities is through the roof as well. And so we're trying to find ways as legislators on both sides of the aisle to find those cost savings for them. Property taxes are an issue that I hear a lot about in my community as well. But I'm looking at it from the perspective of how do we help those new homeowners when they do buy that home, and then the next year their property taxes jump up, 50% in some cases. And so then it becomes an unaffordable purchase for that young family as they're just trying to build their life. And so it's a very nuanced discussion. Completely cutting out property taxes would defund our public schools. It would defund public safety.
Yep.
Those are not things that I think our residents are willing to trade off.
There's got to be a backup plan to fill that in.
Yes, and what the Speaker has talked about is eliminating the state portion of the property taxes that are collected and backfilling that in with a sales tax on selective discretionary service purchases, and people can control that. They can economize. They have much more control over that, and it's an open, out in the air tax. The problem with property taxes is you've got people that have been in their homes, own their homes, and just can't afford to stay there because it's that repeat hit year after year after year. So again, it's balance. There is a way to do this, and there is a middle ground. We just have to be willing to each side give a little bit and take a little bit.
Yeah, and it feels like there's a lot of common ground there. Let me ask you both about data centers. We've seen some legislation this week that would put a one-year pause on new data centers. Where do you stand on these?
You know, we've passed some of the strongest regulations around data centers when this law was first presented to the legislature a few years ago, but we have to go further. I think that that's been something that we're hearing loud and clear from our residents. So further protecting water as a component of these projects, but especially our utility rates. No residents in Michigan should be seeing any increase in the utility rates based on data center projects happening. And so I know that there's further discussion on this topic, and I'm hopeful that we can dig in and find some common ground here because our residents are asking for it.
Well, DTE has said that the companies that build these will be on the hook for those costs. Yeah. Data centers, where do you have one overriding concern more than anything else with these?
I happen to be a big fan of data centers. They're the future. AI is the future. Michigan is a manufacturing state. Rochester Hills, we build more. Rochester Hills and now expanded into Auburn Hills. We build more industrial robots than anybody in North America. And we're great at the robots. The AI is putting the brain in the robots, and that is the future. We're looking at a population demographic cliff in that age group. China is certainly looking at it. We've got to stay ahead of the curve. The water issue is interesting. It's a standard cost for operating a data center. We have access to water, but they're not stupid. That you recycle the water, just like your car pumps millions of gallons of coolant around in a circle during its lifetime. You're not constantly adding coolant all the time. It's a recirculating use of an asset.
The governor agrees with you, but obviously the people where it's in their backyard do not. What is the message that you feel they aren't getting?
I think we just leave it at the governor agrees with me, and that's the headline. But no, well, it's an unknown. And relative to the electricity cost, which is a big concern, the president in his State of the Union, it was just one sentence, but it certainly caught my attention, allow the data centers to generate their own electricity. And they have that capability with the current laws that we have in place. And if need be, you know, let the current generators that might have some kind of territorial rights receive a licensing fee.
But it is bipartisan. You expect that to pass, by the way?
We're working on what that could look like, because you are seeing Republicans and Democrats hear the same complaints from residents about these projects. So we'll see if there's a pathway forward.
I have less than a minute. Let me just quickly ask you about the constitutional carry legislation introduced that would let gun owners, carry concealed pistols without a permit. Where are you on that?
You know, I think that we've seen this type of movement from Republicans in the legislature in many different instances. We're more focused on how do we protect people from the massive issue of gun violence. We've seen it time and time again impacting so many of our residents, whether it was Oxford or Michigan State, and everyday violence that happens in our cities. These are things that we've been trying to address with the safe storage law and universal background checks. That's where our efforts should be headed. 20 seconds. Does that legislation make it more dangerous for people out there?
Well, I had a concealed pistol license, and I carried for 4 years. I let it expire. I appreciated the training and the additional reading I did. I would be against having a constitutional carry. I'm not sure. I'm not a constitutional expert, but I'd be willing to learn more. But I appreciated the training I had.
I'll leave it there. Representative Mark Tisdel, Senator Darrin Camilleri, thanks so much again, as always. More Flashpoint after this. Back here on Flashpoint, and State Budget Director Jen Flood is here on the heels of the governor releasing her budget and outlining her priorities in her State of the State address. Jen, good to have you with us. Let me start with the size of this budget proposal. So $88 billion, if I have that right, which is $7 billion more than what it currently is. And critics of the governor have said the spending has gotten too much. So why is this proposal so robust?
Sure. When you break down our budget, we get about 40% of our resources from the federal government. That funds really important programs like emergency response, Medicaid, making sure seniors and kids have food. And so when you see that big total, a lot of that reflects the support from Washington, D.C. We made a number of significant changes last year after Congress passed the One Big Beautiful Bill Act to make sure that Michiganders have access to Medicaid. It gives health care to more than 2.5 million Michiganders. So some of the federal uncertainty caused that change from year to year, but when you adjust for inflation, we're about 4% bigger than when the governor took office. And at the same time, we've made some historic investments and paid down debt. And
4%, and that was like a $20 billion difference, isn't it, from that first budget?
the general fund is where the state has discretion, and so that spending is 4% over.
So I know part of this, kind of the linchpin of what the governor wants to do is some increase in taxes on vices and that sort. And Speaker of the House, Matt Hall, has already come out saying no taxes on his watch like this. So how do you able to make that work? How are you guys going to be able to hammer that one out?
Sure. This is going to be a challenging budget year. Last year, Congress passed a bill that blew $1 billion hole in our state budget. Just like families and small businesses, the state is facing increased health care costs. And it's happening at the same time that Washington, D.C. is passing the buck to states on really important programs like health care and food assistance. So we've got a number of challenges that we're facing, but the governor put forward a responsible mix of revenue, reduction, and efficiencies, and drawing from reserves. So she put out her plan. I know the House will put out their own plan in the weeks and months ahead, and the governor's got a track record of getting 7 bipartisan balanced budgets done, and I know we'll get another one done this year.
Some just barely, but yes. Now, speaking of the speaker, the governor earlier this week told me in an interview she didn't expect, or she didn't have it on her bingo card, that Matt Hall was going to, propose this $5 billion in unexpected sales tax expansion. How is that going to throw a wrench into how all of this works?
Yeah, I know there's an increased partisanship in the environment right now. But at the end of the day, I really think that Republicans and Democrats, we care about the same things: investing in our kids, protecting seniors, protecting access to health care. And we know right now Michigan families are facing increased costs. When it comes to property taxes, the governor had a proposal in her budget that would save seniors a couple $100s a year on their property taxes by restoring a tax credit. And the speaker has a plan on property tax relief too. And
Some common ground there.
Yes, and we'll look forward to seeing the details on his proposal in the weeks and months ahead. And I know we'll find some common ground to get some good work done.
Not to mention a ballot initiative that wants to give everybody free property taxes. So hopefully there's a lot of common ground there. Now, last year we saw the part of the roads deal was $420 million in new taxes on marijuana. Still, that one's still in the court system. If that gets ruled unconstitutional and you got to find that $420 million somewhere, how does that affect this whole negotiation?
We feel really good about the bipartisan roads deal that we passed in the fall. For decades, lawmakers and governors have been trying to make sure that every penny paid at the pump goes into our roads, and we finally got that done. We're going to invest $2 billion a year fixing roads across the state, including local neighborhood roads. So it's a historic investment. We feel really solid about the package, and we'll watch what happens in the courts, but we think we're in great shape.
And like we said, you mentioned there are a lot of deadlines you follow. The governor's already put out her proposal. We expect the Senate and House to get their act in order before July 1st. But again, even when all of those get followed, last year we had quite a battle in our hands. How do you foresee that shaking out this year? You mentioned the bipartisanship, or I should say the partisanship.
Yes. As you mentioned, the governor put out her proposal on time. We're expecting the Senate to follow a traditional path and move some budgets this spring. I'm optimistic and hopeful the House will do the same thing. The legislature has a deadline to get a budget to the governor's desk by July 1st. So we will be here. We'll be ready to work to pass a budget that improves the lives of Michiganders, and I'm confident we'll get it done.
In those meetings, by the way, I know you can't divulge so much, but when you're sitting in those meetings, what is it like when you get to those points and everybody's a little bit heightened? Do you ever think to yourself, oh boy, we're never going to get this done? Or is there always positivity?
There's always, I really believe that everyone cares about the same thing at the end of the day. And we come at it from different approaches. But the governor's first 4 years, we had an all-Republican legislature, and we were able to get really good things done. That's when we created the Reconnect program, which gives adults a chance to go back and get an associate's degree at no cost, and that means bigger paychecks and lifelong earnings. Yeah. We passed 4 balanced budgets then that invested record levels in our students, in our roads, and lowered costs for everyday Michiganders. So we may approach things from a different perspective, but I think we'll find a lot of common ground this year.
Well, everybody is rooting for that, for sure. I'm certain schools are, and everybody who suffered a little bit last year. But Jen Flood, thanks so much. We appreciate the insight into the budget process. More Flashpoint coming up right after this. Four things before you are dismissed on this Sunday morning. The citizen-only voting ballot initiative is a step closer to showing up on your ballot in November. Supporters turned in 750,000 signatures this week. That measure would require proof of citizenship to vote. Currently, you have to show ID, and if you forget your ID, you have to sign an affidavit saying you are who you say you are. If this passes, you'd still be able to vote without your ID, but those ballots would be set aside to be verified later. If Attorney General Dana Nessel got paid by the lawsuit, she'd be a rich woman. Her office filing a couple more this week. One lawsuit targets the parent company of Kalshi, which is a popular online prediction market that has been under heavier scrutiny as of late for allowing people to bet on things like war, politics, even things like if a fan runs out on the field at a game. Nessel argues this site needs approval from the Michigan Gaming Control Board to operate here. The other lawsuit joins several other states fighting the president's new 15% global tariffs, which he put in place after the Supreme Court struck down his previous tariffs. Now, while the president deals with that and fallout from the firing of Kristi Noem and the war in Iran, he's also likely to get more Jeffrey Epstein questions this week. His Department of Justice released 3 previously withheld FBI interviews this week. Those interviews show a woman making uncorroborated accusations to agents that she was sexually abused by the president and Jeffrey Epstein starting when she was 13 years old. The president has denied any wrongdoing connected to Epstein. All right, a couple of recent surveys had some interesting numbers. First, from Wallet Hub, 66% of Americans think their current tax rate is too high, and yet 78% are more worried about affordability than they are taxes right now. And from our friends at Glengarriff Group and founder Richard Juba, who does our polling here. His recent polling shows Michiganders think the state is pretty average, when in actuality, it's much worse. Michigan ranks 45th in attracting high-tech jobs, 40th in average income per person, and we are the worst state in the nation when it comes to income growth per person over the last 25 years. Think about that one. Dead last, which could be why people are so upset about inflation, because their wages simply aren't keeping up with that. And one correction, by the way, that Glengarriff poll that I was talking about, it was commissioned by the Detroit Regional Chamber, which also endorsed Mike Duggan for governor. Last week during our roundtable, I mistakenly said it was the Detroit Economic Club, DEC, DRC. You can forgive me for that one. Hey, what are your thoughts? Email me at flashpoint@clickondetroit.com or leave a comment on any of the Flashpoint pages on social media. And if you're just now tuning in, I'm sorry, you didn't spring forward in time. I'm Jason Colthorpe. We'll see you later.